Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Eric Saviano with Enroll Nebraska and Nebraska Appleseed. I want to welcome you to our webinar today, which is part of our series about healthcare in Nebraska, specifically related to the Affordable Care Act and Nebraska Medicaid. Today, we are going to be talking about special enrollment periods, those special times of the year when open enrollment is closed, and there are opportunities for folks to still get coverage. We're going to take time to talk about those in a minute, but I want to give some housekeeping things. For those of you who've never been on one of these webinars, we have all of the information that you are going to need and that will be referenced at enrollnebraska.org/EEG. I'm going to put that in the chat box right now. The chat box is where you can post questions at any point during the webinar. We will be addressing those at a specific time at the end of the webinar or during the webinar itself. So we'll see what's time for during the presentations. Also, you should know that if you have technical difficulties, which has come up on these before, kind of frighteningly frequently, you can find the webinar slides at the website enrollnebraska.org/EEG, or if you're having trouble with the audio, you should do your best to just sign out and sign right back in as quick as you can so that we can good chance to talk with you. So that housekeeping items about our webinar. So with that, I'm going to just introduce myself a little more. That's a picture of me. I'm the statewide coordinator at Enroll Nebraska. Feel free to contact me if you have questions or concerns or issues about anything and everything related to enrollment. Here's our agenda for today. We are going to be talking about open enrollment and how that went, give some final numbers on that. Also, we're going to talk about some current events related to the open enrollment period and the Affordable Care Act in general. Go into our main topic, the special enrollment periods, and we have CMS Alyssa Balch on the line to help us with that in a few minutes. And then finally, we'll give some resources and materials that you can use to do outreach in your organizations and with your clients. Quick reminder again on the right, enrollnebraska.org/EEG is the place to find all of this information that needs to be downloaded. All right, so for folks who don't know, Enroll Nebraska is the statewide coalition that is bringing together enrollment assisters around the state. We also do work with community organizations, healthcare providers, and advocacy groups, all interested in getting more people covered by health insurance. The tool that we've used in the recent past to do that is the Affordable Care Act, but we are open to any and every way to get that working. We have a great resource online, enrollnebraska.org, to help you with that. We also are online on social media, including on Facebook and Twitter. All right. Luck plan, good strategy in Vegas, bad strategy for your health coverage. I think that's true. Okay, while we're at it, we have quite a few people on the line, and I want to make sure people are looking at this education and engagement group survey. That's what we call this group, these webinars that take place about monthly. We give the opportunity to share your feedback to us so that we can improve and make this more relevant to you all. It is on enrollnebraska.org/EEG. If you have time, take 3 minutes, give us some valuable feedback. I'll try to remind folks at the end of the webinar as well, but this should be very quick and should give you a chance to share your thoughts on any and everything related to these webinars. Anybody who's attended one is welcome to participate in the survey, and we hope you do. All right, so I found some great slides that just did an overview of the insured population in 2016. And this does not cover the new open enrollment period very well, but it does cover how we looked before we started open enrollment. These are on the webinar slides found at enrollnebraska.org/EEG, and can be good resources for you. The Affordable Care Act has pushed enrollment to historic lows. I think everybody should know that. It is the major effort that since Medicare and Medicaid was created in 1965 to reduce uninsured rates in America. 2015 or by 2016, we got to around 8.7%. And some estimates as low as 7% from Enroll America. So, like I've said, about 20 million people fewer are uninsured. Under 1 in 10 in 100. I guess that's an easy way to say it. Under 10 in 100 have no insurance now in the United States. So this is also something that is working well for folks who do enroll in coverage. So these are some good stats for you to take with you. This is kind of an odd time to be talking about this. We are going to talk about numbers specific to Nebraska and the open enrollment period. An overview to folks who don't know some of the statistics behind this work. And so 77% of adults who tried to find a new primary care physician found it easy to do so, as opposed to hard or super easy, I suppose, and more. I think when folks look at the data, folks are generally satisfied. We know that nationally, since the Trump administration took office, the law has actually gone up. Add to this as well. Finally, some of the coverage available for 100 or less. Some stats that will play out a little bit further, I believe, in March when we see final numbers from Open Enrollment 4. We'll see how many folks in Nebraska and across the United States got coverage for less than 100 a month. Credits. Clearly, the majority still have that available to them. So this is my last slide for open enrollment, how it went for the 2017 enrollment period. Released in February, right after the January 31st deadline, in the federal cases, 9.2 million enrolled nationally, as opposed to 9.7 million last year. That is about 500,000 less, admittedly. However, it still shows a trend that this marketplace is healthy and still is sustainable. People are still interested, even with some of the headlines that started the open enrollment period, things like 25% increases in premiums and the like. People still find this valuable and are still interested in purchasing it. In Nebraska, we went into the last 2 weeks of open enrollment, actually at around 86,000, and relatively over the final 2 weeks of open enrollment, we hit 4,371. So that was a little bit of a drop, but also a very healthy number for Nebraska itself. That is a little less than 2,000 lost, but because of the turbulence in the market and some of the things we heard from the White House, we think that some of the folks who had enrolled maybe dropped out or they did not pay their first premiums. That is likely why some of those numbers actually dropped 2,000 in the final 2 weeks of open enrollment, which is historically a high a situation where more people enroll. So that is open enrollment for 2017. Any questions folks have, please put in the box. But I wanted to give a brief overview of that, and then going to touch on some of the issues that are current happening in ACA. So I'm going to hand it over to Molly McCleary, who works with Nebraska Appleseed as their staff healthcare attorney, and who works with me on Enroll Nebraska. So Molly, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Eric just wanted me to mention what is going on a couple different topics with the ACA. The executive order signed on President Trump's first day, what's going on with replacing the ACA and repealing it, this new proposed rule that was announced yesterday, and also what's going on with Medicaid expansion at the state level. So just quickly to note on the executive order, there was an executive order signed on January 20th, broadly written with the intent of, quote, minimizing the economic burden of the ACA and allowing the agencies that are responsible for administering the ACA to action the burdens of the ACA. There is a lot of speculation as to what lead to in that Secretary Price is just sort of getting his feet under him in terms of the new administration. So I think there's been a lot of thought that once Secretary Price is in place and has time that we'll see the real impact of this order and what they will choose to either enforce or not enforce. To mention would be what's going on with repealing and replacing the ACA. Congress started the budget reconciliation process at the beginning of January to repeal the ACA. They have not coalesced around a real replacement plan at this point. There's, as of like an hour ago, a plan being released after they come back President's Day. And my guess is that would be pretty similar to plans that have been released by and other leaders in Congress that we've seen before. So probably a shift to more high deductible plans with health savings accounts, changing how the tax credits work, and then likely some changes in how Medicaid is financed between the federal government and the states. There's still questions about what to do with Medicaid expansion since over half the states have expanded and others haven't. And there's also questions about what to do with funding for Planned Parenthood. And so those are sort of the that are making it difficult for folks to coalesce around a real plan. The Center for Medicare Services put out a proposed rule yesterday that attempt to what they were calling stabilize the individual and small group markets. This is a combination of changes that were proposed in the summer by the Obama administration and then some additional changes. But really what it does is handful of things. It changes and I guess I should say this is a proposed rule, so it has to go through notice and comment and be approved. So these are proposed changes. It would change the special enrollment verification that you would have to, the documentation that you have to submit to be determined eligible for a special enrollment period. It would change the rules around grace periods for non-payment of premiums. So insurance companies could premiums for unpaid coverage before someone could enroll for the next year. This is really getting at that idea that gets talked about, that people use that 3-month grace period at the end of the year premiums at the end of the year, and then they're never penalized for not paying the premiums. Do some things to allow insurance companies to change the coverage that's offered under each of the metal levels. So they might be able to change the benefits, for example, that would be offered in a silver plan or a bronze plan. It would enrollment period for 2018 to about 6 weeks versus, so November 1st to December 15th, as opposed to our current period. So there's the main things. This still has to, like I said, go through notice and comment, and it's open for public comment until March 7th. So got a little bit of time on that. Last thing would be state efforts around Medicaid expansion. There is a bill in the state legislature this year. It's LB 441, sponsored by Senator Moorfeld here in Lincoln. The hearing for that bill is on March 8th at 1:30 in the Health and Human Services Committee. There is some thought that to best position ourselves from a budget perspective this year with our $900 million budget deficit, and then coming down the road at the federal level, that Medicaid expansion would allow us to best situate ourselves financially. So I think that would be what you would hear a lot of folks testifying about at that hearing. So if anyone has any questions about any of these things, please let me know. And yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, thanks, Molly. I think change will continue doing these updates on these webinars. And so Molly's going to stick around and be around for questions at the end. So if you have more, feel free to mention them. At this point, we're going to talk more about special enrollment periods, which is why we're here. I am going to hand it over to our CMS representative for our region, and who's been really helpful in walking through some of these changes. So Balch, who has been really supportive of our work at Enroll Nebraska. I'm going to give you a chance to talk about, of course, the special enrollment period, but if you have anything to add or alter from what Molly shared, feel free to, since we have you on the line. So Alyssa, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and hello, everyone. Before we jump into the slide on special enrollment periods, I want to thank everyone that's on the call today for any work that you did during the open enrollment period to help people sign up for coverage, apply for an exemption, whatever their situation may be. We definitely appreciate that. And one thing also I just want to mention that Eric showed earlier that shows the change in enrollment for the 2017 plan year compared to 2016. Keeping in mind that it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as those individuals that were not insuring through the marketplace have insurance elsewhere. It is a good thing if people get new jobs, that employment, different things like that. As long as they're staying insured, that reaches our overall goal that we have with the Affordable Care Act. So try and keep that in mind as well, that you still did a great job during open enrollment regardless of the specific number of people that are insured in the marketplace. With that, we can go to the next slide, Eric, and our focus, as Eric said today, is about the special enrollment periods. The open enrollment period ended on January 31st, but we recognize that people have things that happen to them throughout the year that changes their need for insurance. And we do have special enrollment periods within the marketplaces, our terminology for it. Of course, with employer insurance, they might say you have a qualifying event or a life event that allows for a change to be made. You can advance to the next slide, please. In the marketplace for the individual market, so not the shop marketplace, but today we're focusing specifically on the individual marketplace, people have 60 days from the date of a qualifying event to apply for their special enrollment period. And that can be 60 days before the event actually takes place or 60 days after the event takes place. Situation where I might want to apply in advance is if I know that I'm going to be losing my benefits through my employer because I'm retiring or I'm leaving that job, apply for my special enrollment period in advance so that I can get coverage without any lapse in coverage. Of course, if I'm laid off from my job, for example, and I don't really have that forewarning before it happens, then I still have 60 days from that event to special enrollment period. There are a variety of different SEPs that are available through the marketplace, and we categorize them into kind of 6 different groupings. Go through all of those for you today to just kind of bring awareness about the special enrollment period. So if you're not an assister or navigator, but you work with people in the community, have a general idea of what these special enrollment periods are. So as you interact with individuals where you think they may qualify for an SEP or be possibly eligible one, then you can help redirect them to an assister or navigator for further review of that special enrollment period. Next slide, please. We're going to start with our first category, which is the loss of qualifying health coverage. And this encompasses a lot of different people. So it could be their insurance through their employment, whether that's because they chose to leave employment or the employer chose to end the employment relationship. It's also if there's a loss to Medicaid or CHIP eligibility, then that would qualify them as a loss of minimum essential coverage. Also for people with Medicare, I know that the majority of people think of Medicare as insurance you get when you're age 65 or older, which is correct, but we do insure millions of Americans in the Medicare program who are under age 65 and are disabled. And if they lose the disability benefits and they no longer meet that definition because maybe their condition has improved that allows them to return to work, or they no longer meet the definition of disabled for Social Security standpoint, then they would lose their Medicare benefits, and that would give them a special enrollment period. And then also for the dependents that age out of their parents' policy. And we're specifically talking about the dependents that age out if they're being covered under a parent's employer policy or a policy outside of the marketplace. Within the marketplace, in the FFM marketplaces like Nebraska, if a dependent is being covered under a parent's policy and they turn 26, for example, during 2017, they have the option to stay on to that plan through the end of the year. We don't allow the insurance companies to end that coverage in the marketplace in the middle of the year when the dependent turns 26, strictly for that reason. But if they're on an employer plan, every employer has their own discretion for how they exercise that provision. Some may say that you lose coverage the day after you turn 26, the end of the month in which you turn 26, the end of the pay period, whatever they may do in that situation. But that would allow the individuals to have the special enrollment period due to loss of coverage. The other one regarding loss of coverage that I want to discuss, which isn't specifically covered under here, but it still applies, and that is for people that had marketplace coverage in 2016 and their issuer is no longer participating in the marketplace in their service area for 2017. An example in Nebraska would be Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska, because they participated in 2016, but they're not participating in 2017. anyone who had insurance with Blue Cross Blue Shield Nebraska at the end of 2016 has a special enrollment period for loss of minimum essential coverage for 60 days after that date. Meaning those individuals, if they didn't pay their binder payment for the plan that was the alternate selected plan for them, which means they didn't effectuate any coverage for 2017, they still have 60 days from December 31st to come in and purchase insurance due to a loss of minimum essential coverage special enrollment period. That is new for this year, that we've had that process and have really articulated that special enrollment period. So just wanted to bring that to people's attention. The individual consumers that were enrolled with an issuer that was leaving the marketplace in 2017 would have received a notification from their insurance company before the start of the open enrollment period that would have told them that they were not participating in the 2017 plan year and that they would have that special enrollment period. So if people are not quite sure, they would need to go back to that letter that they received from their plan. Next slide, please. The next category that we have is changes in household size. This one is pretty easy for people to remember because they're significant life events that we think of people having, which may change their family's need for insurance. Examples of changing household size obviously is getting married, having a baby, adopting a child, or having a child placed for foster care. So that's increasing the size of the household. There's also situations when the household size may decrease, and that is due to divorce or being legally separated, or maybe having a death in the family. Another one that changes the household size is when someone gains a dependent because of a child support order or some type of other court order that may change their household size, which would qualify them for a special enrollment period. Moving on to the next slide, we have the change in the primary place of living. And this we look at as an individual that changes their zip code or the county where they were in and the new place where they lived. So they don't have to move in or out of the state of Nebraska. Specifically, they can move within the state and still qualify for a special enrollment period. They just either have to change their zip code or county. That changes what the QHPs are potentially to get that. If someone moves to the U.S. from a foreign country or one of the U.S. territories where marketplace coverage isn't available, then that could qualify them for the special enrollment period. It's also applicable to students who may move out of the state or out of the zip code and county where the parents live, in school, and then move back maybe during the summer or after graduation. That would qualify them because we, of course, would want them to have coverage where they're going to school. So if people in Nebraska like to cross the state line and go to my alma mater of K-State, then that would be a special enrollment period because they're obviously moving to an entirely different state and would need coverage based on that address if they want. Seasonal workers, so people that may move in or out of the state due to the seasonal work that they have, so migrant workers could qualify for that special enrollment period, and then people that are moving to or from a shelter or other type of transition housing can also qualify for a special enrollment period. Next slide, please.
Alyssa, I'll jump in with a question real quick.
Sure.
It's back on the household size change SEP. How do we fill out the application for a divorce? It's not a question anywhere on the application. So how do they show they qualify?
It's going to be that you're removing someone from the household. So if you're, let's say that you're just a couple and there's no children, you have two people that are on your tax household, do a change of life event and update the application, then you're going to mark that you're removing that person from tax dependent. So it may not specifically ask it why they're no longer a tax dependent, but you're removing them because they're no longer a tax dependent. And the reason that they're no longer a tax dependent is because of the divorce.
Let me give you another hypothetical. What about the person who's removed and they need to fill out a brand new application for SEP?
That would work. I mean, that would be their SEP. So if we stick with the husband-wife situation, the husband was the application filer at the start of this year. And sometime during the course of 2017, he and his wife get a divorce. Then he would update his application to remove her as a tax dependent, which changes him from a household of 2 to a household of 1. And then she would go in and start a new application, and she's going all on her own, and she's going to say that she's starting an application in the middle of the year because of a divorce, and then it's going to say something to the effect of, when was your divorce final, or when did you receive a divorce? And she would put in the date, and as long as that date is within 60 days of the date that she's doing the application, then she proceeds through the application and enrollment process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
If we can
on number
jump
4.
a couple of slides, we're on number 4 for the change in eligibility for marketplace coverage or help paying for coverage.
Yep.
So what this kind of category is looking at is people that have a change in household income. That basically changes what kind of financial assistance they get through the marketplace. Then we're going to allow them the opportunity for a special enrollment period. That could be people that are in states like Nebraska where there's currently no Medicaid expansion. If they were below 100% of the federal poverty level during open enrollment, they didn't qualify for Medicaid because they're in the adult group that is covered in the expansion part of Medicaid, and they didn't qualify for tax credits because they were below 100% of the federal poverty level. Let's say in May, they get a pay increase that takes them above 100%, or they get a new job that takes them to their new salary above 100%, then that would qualify for them for a special enrollment period because they're newly eligible for help paying for coverage. It can also be people that had coverage already in the marketplace in 2017, and they experience a change of household income, whether it's positive or negative as far as the income going up or down. They may qualify for a special enrollment period. For consumers that were already covered, let's say from the beginning of the year, that have that change in income, we, of course, always ask people to report any change of income to the marketplace so that we make sure they have the most accurate tax credits, so that we try and reduce any need for them to pay back that when they file their taxes. But if people change within the threshold of receiving tax credits, they may get a special enrollment period. And that's typically if people are going to, their income change in between the different bands for the cost sharing reductions, then that typically is going to give them a new special enrollment period, because we would want to have them in the plan that is the correct cost sharing relationship based on the CSRs that they're available for. So we break it down into people that are between 100 and 150% of the FPL, 151 to 200%, and then 201 to 250. So if I was in the 150 to 200 and there was a reduction in household income for some reason, and I go to the 100 to 150 FPL range, I now get a better cost sharing reduction, meaning I as the consumer have to pay less for my claims when I go and seek care, then that moves you into that plan so that cost sharing reduction actually is recognized by the marketplace and the insurance company. You'll also see on this slide that we talk about the gains or maintained status as a member in a federally recognized tribe or the Alaskan Native Claims Settlement Act. Also becomes newly eligible for marketplace coverage after being released from incarceration. And I just want to, on that last bullet point, because I myself kind of had the mindset of, well, if someone's recently been released from incarceration, they probably don't have a job, which means they don't have income. The Medicaid gap in a state like Nebraska where there's no Medicaid expansion. So is that really a group that I would want to focus my energies on when I'm looking at how to find people that may benefit from these special enrollment periods? And I think it's worth noting to say that people that are released from incarceration may have other family members that are in their tax household that are part of the community. So while they might not be earning their own income, they're part of a tax household that does have income that may qualify for them for the APTCs and or CSRs, which they could come into the marketplace and still be able to afford their coverage, or they may just have other family members or anyone else that's allowed under the law to pay their premium for them. So just kind of wanted to bring that to people's attention because I myself kind of thought, well, if you're recently released from incarceration and you don't have income, then you're probably not going to be able to afford premiums, especially without tax credits. So moving on to the next slide, we have the fifth category, which is an enrollment or plan error. Some examples that fall under this category is if there was any misinformation, misinterpretation, misconduct, or inaction of someone working in an official capacity as a marketplace. That could be if our call center representatives inadvertently selected the wrong plan for them. So let's say that the consumer was doing an application over the phone and the consumer said that, yeah, I want to be an X plan, and the call center representative made a human error and put them in Y plan, then we would consider that a special enrollment period and we would go back and correct it to be back into the plan they wanted to be. Misinformation may be if an agent broker or a navigator or assister provided incorrect information to them and that impacted the consumer making the decision that they made for their health plan, then we would let them have a special enrollment period to correct that based on the correct information about the plan and benefits. If there's any type of technical error, then an individual may receive a special enrollment period. So for those of you who are navigators and assisters, if you've ever run into what we generally just refer to as red box or yellow box errors, and that prevents someone from enrolling, then we would give them a special enrollment period to come back and get that coverage once we've fixed that technical situation. The last of the first set of bullet points, the third sub-bullet point of that in regards to wrong plan data, referring to benefits or cost-sharing information. What's important to know about that special enrollment period is that if an issuer provides data to CMS, and that's what we use to display on our website, and an insurance company realizes, oh my gosh, we gave them the wrong information, whatever that information was, then they have to request with us to correct that information. And we do that on a monthly basis. There's a window of time where the insurance companies have the option to correct the data that we're displaying if they have anything incorrect. But before we allow them to correct the data, they have to tell us how many people were impacted by that incorrect data. So they're going to look at specifically what was misrepresented, if it was drilled down to a specific plan where the information was incorrect and not all of the plans they have on the marketplace, which is typically how it is, then they have to say, you know, during this period of time that we gave you this information, X number of people enrolled in that plan. And then between the insurance company and the agency, we're going to either agree to the fact that it's going to honor the wrong information if that is more generous to the consumer than the correct information, or marketplace is going to agree to let them have a special enrollment period where they can come back and look at plans. They may still choose to be in that plan, but we give them that option. People that qualify for a special enrollment period because of that wrong data being displayed get a letter from the insurance company telling them that they have that special enrollment period, and then that list of individuals is given to our call center so that they know to manually trigger that SCP for them. So I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of background as to how that one special enrollment period works. Again, it's generated by a letter from the insurance company telling them that they have that special enrollment period. And then last, of course, on that slide is if there's, if it can be demonstrated that a marketplace plan violated a material provision of their contract, then that is another opportunity for a special enrollment period. Moving on to the next slide, other qualifying events. The first one that we'll see there on that slide is that if someone applied for coverage during the open enrollment period, the application triggered them to be potentially eligible for Medicaid or CHIP, which means that application is routed over to the state's Medicaid agency, and they review it to make a final determination on Medicaid and CHIP eligibility. And either that decision was made after the end of open enrollment, or we didn't get the transfer back until after open enrollment, because that state's also going to send a file back and says, you know, thank you for letting us know about Susie Smith's application, but Susie doesn't qualify for Medicaid. That would be a special enrollment period because they were doing it during open enrollment, but they couldn't proceed until after the open enrollment period ended through no fault of their own. Victims of domestic abuse or spousal abandonment may also qualify for special enrollment periods. AmeriCorps service members who are either starting or ending their service can qualify for a special enrollment period. And then if there's exceptional circumstances that prevented an individual from applying for coverage either during an open enrollment period, or maybe they qualified for a special enrollment period, but there was an exceptional circumstance that prevented them from doing so in that 60-day window of the event. When we talk about exceptional circumstances, we're meaning things like the person was hospitalized and incapacitated, during that full 60-day period of time that prohibited them from physically completing an application and enrolling, or if they're part of a natural disaster. If there was a tornado that occurred in an area during open enrollment, then we may grant people in that area special enrollment periods to come in and pick up a marketplace plan at that time. If we look then at the next slide, just to go over a few things that do not trigger an SAP. People voluntarily dropping other coverage when, so if they're outside the open enrollment period, if they voluntarily drop any other coverage they have, that's not in and of itself a special enrollment period. If they're terminated from other coverage for non-payment of premium or for fraud, that could be if they had a marketplace plan and they started the year with that, and then at some point they stopped paying premiums for that plan and were terminated appropriately for that, then they're not to be able to come into the marketplace again during that calendar year and use that as they can't claim loss of minimum essential coverage because they stopped paying a premium, and that's what caused them to lose their insurance. Divorce or death of a family member without a resulting loss of coverage is our next one. So just to clarify, divorce or death from a regulatory standpoint or a statutory standpoint are not qualifying events, but the fact that there's a change in the household size can create the special enrollment period. If someone moves just for the purpose of medical treatment or vacation, so an example would be a friend of mine, her mother is currently vacationing in Key West, Florida for the entire month of February. She doesn't get a special enrollment period because she's there for an extended vacation. She just gets to enjoy the nice warm weather, beach air. Then last but not least is changing from one legally present status to another. And we give that example there, becoming a U.S. citizen when they were previously lawfully present, because a lawfully present individual can purchase insurance. The fact that their status may change to being a U.S. citizen in and of itself doesn't qualify them for a special enrollment period. I do want to let people know, again, whether you're a navigator or a sister or a partner within the community, we do have a new special enrollment period publication or outreach brochure on the marketplace.cms.gov website. I encourage you to take a look again at that. It's going to go over the information we've gone through today. Have that available for the people and clientele that you may interact with to let people know that they do have options potentially for gaining coverage outside the open enrollment period. If you are a community partner and you don't specifically help people with the application and enrollment process, you can always have those individuals call 211 when they're in the state of Nebraska or living in Nebraska, and they will help them find their local navigator or a sister to help them through the special enrollment application process. Individuals can also go to healthcare.gov during the year, and there's a screener now that we're outside of open enrollment that they should see from the home screen, where it's going to ask them questions without them having to get their personal information like name and social security number, and it's going to kind of be a tool to help them see if they would qualify for a special enrollment period. With that, I will turn it back over to Eric.
Cool. Thank you, Alyssa. That's great info. I think anybody who has questions, those are great resources. We also have a few more minutes on the webinar. If you have questions, put them in the chat box below, and we will make sure that Alyssa has a chance to see them. So before we shut it down, I'm going to share some outreach opportunities and get our enrollment assisters thinking, but also stick around because there are some outreach materials that can be easily printed and handed out at other organizations that are interested in helping out too. So these next two slides are pretty great for enrollment assisters thinking about how to get the word out and where to find people to outreach to these for these special enrollment periods. These categories, I mean, it would take a team of assisters, our whole state probably, to get around to getting to all of these locations. So I'll suggest that folks take one or two and try to build some relationships and see if you can get in and leave materials at some of these places. Having baby, getting married seems a little more fun and joyful than maybe finding those divorced and losing employment kind of jobs and things like that. But there are equal places to find all of those. So take a look at these. I'd really suggest you study these and find places where you know people. Sit around in your offices and find people who know have connections in these offices and try to get out there. Families USA created a 2-page document that has even more suggestions about where to find places. This is for download at enrollnebraska.org/EEG, where we keep all of this information. So I'll suggest you go there and download that to help with your brainstorming. I believe this is the resource that Alyssa suggested you download from healthcare.gov. We've just linked to that at enrollnebraska.org/EEG. So take a look at that as well. Covers all of the situations, one of the 6 categories of SEPs, and describes the event itself, how you qualify and how you qualify, and then the time frame when you will receive coverage based on that special enrollment period. So this is really great as a desk reference for enrollment assisters, but can be really useful for organization leaders and school leaders, people who run into the people we're trying to get enrolled. Finally, this is a 1-page document that is a docx kind of docx kind of a file type that can be easily edited. And I left it that way so that you can create a 2nd page that describes where people can go to get health coverage or to get help enrolling in these different special enrollment periods. So enrollment assisters can put their organization's name, but other folks on the line can put 211, and people will do that outreach. Leave it in places where you think there might be people who need to get covered. Once again, put any questions you have in the box, if you have any, from me about open enrollment, Molly about any current events, and then Alyssa about special enrollment periods. That's my questioning cow. I like to put a new animal each time. I don't know about that tongue, though. Kind of odd. In the meantime, as questions roll in slowly, haven't seen any yet, I'm going to remind folks about the Education and Engagement Group survey. Please take that if you have a chance and you've attended one of these webinars. Tell us what we're doing well and what you've used based on these webinars, what activities you've taken as next steps. Well, if there are no questions, we will close down the webinar with a reminder about our next webinar. It's going to be 1 month from now on March 16th at noon, just like this one. And it is going to be any new changes to the healthcare environment and current events. Let's see, there is one question that just came in from Shelley. Farmers or ranchers, any recommendations? Changes for them? And that is a very good question. Income changes and predictions of income for farmers and ranchers can be notoriously difficult to make, those predictions. So Alyssa, do you have experience with that and want to share any insights about when to make those changes or how to predict those kind of things for a special enrollment period?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I know that specific group of consumers can be a little challenging to work with because it's so difficult for them to estimate what their income is going to be for the year. I think working with them initially to set up the estimated income is, of course, looking at the last year or two and what they had for income there. To try and estimate what they're going to make going forward. And then maybe asking them to check in on like a quarterly basis to see how that's going, if they feel like that's still a fair estimate. I know that's not as frequent as what we say when we say, you know, that you should update your income within 30 days of a change of income, but since they're projecting, unless something significant changes, I don't know if, you know, once a month them trying to tell us what they think their income is going to be is helpful. Another thing that we would want to remind those consumers or anyone else really that is self-employed where they may not have a stable income that they can easily project, like a person who works a full-time job or even a part-time job where they have a pretty consistent paycheck, is to maybe not take the full APTC amounts that they're awarded when they complete the application at the beginning. If they can afford it within their monthly budget to take a little bit less than that, then that helps them come out to where they're not going to owe back money when they file their taxes in the spring. So that's another way where it's not as important for them to get as close on that projection because they're not risking having to repay that significant amount back to the IRS. But that would kind of be my thoughts on that for that specific type of consumer.
Great. All right, so thanks everybody for being on the webinar. I do want to redirect you to our survey one more time and to our next webinar. But with that, I want to thank our speakers, Molly and Alyssa, and we'll talk to everyone next time. Thanks.